Good evening. Welcome to incorporating local history into the classroom and curriculum. My name is Mark Jackson, and I'll go into a little bit about myself, and I'll go into some of the ways that I've used local history, specifically with Norwalk, since this is where I teach and where I live, and how I've used that to further engage my students within the classroom. I just wrapped up my 14th year as a social studies teacher for Norwalk Public Schools. Like I said, I've been a lifelong resident. I was born and raised in Norwalk. I live in Norwalk with my family. I have a 15-year-old daughter and two 7-year-old sons, and been married for the last 16 years. So it's a family endeavor. And I believe that living in the city you work in has a lot of benefits, and I'll get into that in a moment. I'm also a historical commissioner for the city of Norwalk, an adjunct professor for the University of Bridgeport, where I teach a course on transnationalism for up-and-coming social studies teachers. I'm an indoor field hockey coach, an assistant wrestling coach for Brian McMahon. I've been a student council faculty liaison, social studies department chair, grade level leader. I was a former chairman of the scholarship committee for the Norwalk Exchange Club, which is a nonprofit organization that helps raise awareness in the prevention of child abuse. And currently I am a summer camp director. I've been doing this now for the last 4 years. So I am a very busy guy, but I always try to find ways to make things fun and exciting for the students. So I do a variety of activities. I like to call them field studies, not necessarily scavenger hunts, because field studies just sounds cooler. So when you tell the parents, hey, I'm sending your kids on a field study versus a scavenger hunt, sometimes the parents are a little more buy-in with that. There are various things. I have the students attend the annual Oyster Festival. We have a piece of the World Trade Center here in Norwalk because we did have a number of families that were impacted by 9/11. We have a site called the Heritage Wall. We do an annual event with the Norwalk Historical Society called the Haunting at Mill Hill. Veterans Day service, Field of Flags, Memorial Day scavenger hunt, Shea McGrath Memorial Service, Memorial Day Parade, and the founding and burning of Norwalk. Now, these are specific to certain grade levels. At Rote Middle School, we really developed a culmination of 7th and 8th grade involvement when it comes to getting our students in and out of the classroom and learning about local history. So I'll come back to this for the Q&A, but just something to think about. Extra credit events. Why bother with extra credit? How does it get students and parents involved in the community? And what gives students and families a sense of pride and community within their own city or town? So that's just something to think about, and we'll come back to that. The first project in 7th grade that I developed was something called the 9/11 Memorial. And if you take a look at this, it's not something that's overly complicated. Students will usually get about 2 weeks to do this. It's an out-of-school assignment. If the parents can't take their kids, then I do have an alternative for them to do this, where I have a picture of it, but they can still analyze this monument, they just can't physically go see it. I always keep that in the back of my mind with a lot of these scavenger hunts. How can I get kids to do it if parents can't take them? Because, transportation is an issue. But with this 9/11 piece, this was donated shortly after the events of 9/11. It's been 20 years since this piece, or not 20 years. It's been in Norwalk now about 15 years, give or take. And when you look at this, it's right on the town green in Norwalk. I have some articles that go along with the reading, with the assignment, so that students can reflect not just seeing the piece, but understanding the history behind it and its significance. So why do we have this piece of metal here? Because now all of our students are post 9/11. All these kids were born after the fact. So when you think about that, it kind of makes you feel old. But when you look at this, it's just one way to start getting the kids to think about how history impacts their city. So this was just one of, move this toolbar. There you go. That's just one aspect. So we have students go there, they take a picture, they reflect on the article. There's a series of questions they have to answer. And that's it. That's the assignment. But that's getting them in and into the community and doing a different type of activity. The Heritage Wall project. This one I designed about 10 years ago. Now, the whole idea of it incorporating local history was not something that I developed. One of my colleagues, his name is Dean Vaccaro, he was the one that started all these projects about 2 years prior to me being hired at Rhoton. He was the one that really got the idea of getting students involved with the field study, but his was limited to 8th grade, whereas I was teaching 7th grade. I wanted to do something that tied into my curriculum. And one of those projects was something called the Heritage Wall. So in Norwalk, if you get off exit 15, right next to, so literally across the street from Matthews Mansion. So if you've ever been to Norwalk or Lockwood Matthews Mansion, you'll see this wall here. And this wall depicts a lot of the different cultures that represent Norwalk. But it's not just a series of plaques. There's a dedication to a former mayor who was inspirational in getting this developed because he was a former teacher. And he knew how diverse Norwalk's population was, and he wanted to get the students to really buy into their history of their city. And so this park was dedicated to him. His name was Thomas O'Connor. The students go there, they read the plaque, they answer the questions, they have to take a picture of the plaque. So kids can't Google the answers. I try to make sure that they can't Google it and that they actually have to go there. And they're like, do I have to take a picture? I'm like, yes, you have to take a picture. So they have to take a selfie or someone takes a picture. I said, you can go with friends. So when I first started this, cell phones, they weren't as smart as they are now, but now it makes it a lot easier for them to take a picture and just email it to me. I used to make them print it out, but they can now make a picture booklet for extra credit. So that's another way for them to earn extra points. Then they go and read the plaques, answer a series of questions on the plaques. Also, there's another memorial that's there for Hungarian freedom fighters. There was a statue of Columbus there. It was moved about 2-3 years ago when a lot of the cities were taking down their Columbus statues. The St. Anne's Club in Norwalk, they took the statue and put it on their premises. So the students could still visit the statue, but it's across the river from where it used to be. Also, to celebrate our LGBTQ community, they put in a rainbow crosswalk. So I have some literature on that. The students go and read about how that was installed and why it was installed. So it's a very inclusive project when it comes to Norwalk's history and culture specifically. That's why when we look at Norwalk's diverse community, I want them to really think about it. But what was interesting was with part 6, a lot of students started to recognize the demographics didn't match what was on the wall. So in 2019, a group of my students wanted to do something about that. And what they ended up doing was doing a comprehensive history of the wall and how it was designed and how you could go about getting new plaques added to this wall, which was interesting because there was never any history on it. And so I ended up after school taking them to the Norwalk Library, and we started researching through the archives. How did this wall come to be, and how do you get new plaques added? And because of their research, they produced a comprehensive history of the wall. And now the city of Norwalk uses this with their applications. And this year, there was finally a new plaque added for the first time in over 10 years. So that was pretty exciting, but it was thanks to the efforts of my students and what they were able to do. And even now, which I just found this article 2 months ago, that the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism uses their article in their curriculum. They use the Heritage Wall project, which I thought was awesome because I didn't even know this was there. I was Googling something and I saw my name and it said Heritage Wall. And I'm like, what's this? And then I found this, and here it is. It's right on their website. And the project that I used, and they used their newspaper article for this lesson, which I thought was pretty cool. And even now, I got a letter from a former student of the Mayor O'Connor, and she said that it's really nice to see how modern students are still using the same beliefs that he did. Now, these are projects that get kids out into the community. One of the ways that I try to also get kids involved is getting them out of the school and involved in things. So each year, Norwalk has an oyster festival. It's been going on for over 45 years. I do something called Find Mr. Jackson. And I have a picture. I'm going to go back. So this picture in the top right corner up here, I do something called Find Mr. Jackson. I cook at the Norwalk Exchange Club tent. I run the friolators, and I tell the kids, if you find me over the course of the next 3 days, I will give you extra credit. All I have to do is say, hi, Mr. Jackson, I found you. It's something that simple. And I open up a Google Doc and I just take the kids' names down. And I will tell you, I've been doing this for 8-9 years. And I have students that are now adults who still try to come find me because they like getting it's just getting them involved in the community. Or even parents joke and say, hi, Mr. Jackson, do I get extra credit because I found you? But because I had their kids so many years ago, but it gets them involved and into the community. Another thing that we do in Norwalk with the Norwalk Exchange Club is we honor our veterans with a field of flags, and we set up over 400 American flags at Vets Park in Norwalk. And this is for all grades. So when as a department chair, I put this out to my staff and I said, hey, do you want to give extra credit for getting the kids out in the community? It's open, it's free, anybody can go anytime, and it's up for about a week. And all 3 grade levels, if kids go there, take a picture with the flags, all the social studies teachers give them extra credit just for going, because it gets them involved in their community and it gives them a sense of pride of who they are. So down here, here's a group of students who helped set it up. Actually, this is my daughter right here, but she also was involved with doing that. And these are my sons, but I'll come back to this slide in a little bit. One of the other things that we do in 7th grade is a Memorial Day scavenger hunt. Now, Norwalk has a lot of unique memorials because we have 2 Medal of Honor recipients. Now, it's very rare that a town gets even 1 Medal of Honor recipient. We have 2. So every year they have something called the Shea McGrath Memorial Service, where they honor our 2 Medal of Honor recipients and all fallen soldiers from Norwalk. These 2 individuals, one died in World War II and one died in the Vietnam War. And they talk about the history and the legacy of these 2 men, Daniel Shea and John McGrath. And every year, as part of their Memorial Day scavenger hunt, excuse me, part of the assignment for extra credit is just to attend the service. So myself and my colleagues in 7th grade, we'll attend the service and we'll give the kids extra credit. And we've been doing this for years, now to the point where local dignitaries, excuse me, local dignitaries are used to us. Even this year, we met with Senator Blumenthal. He was there, and we took a photo op with Senator Blumenthal and the mayor and his wife. So they're used to Rhoton students attending this annual event. This year we had 35 students at the event. So every year it gets bigger and bigger. But and we get coverage in the local newspaper. So these 2 images are from the Norwalk Hour, who cover the event. So here's to take a look at the assignment. It's called Beyond Names on a Wall, Remembering Norwalk's Fallen Soldiers. It's a field study. So they go around town and analyze various memorials. Down at Calf Pasture Beach, again, we have the Shea McGrath Memorial. They tell us a little bit about who these people were and why we honor them. Also, down on the town green, we have a cannon that was used in World War I. It was used at the Battle of Verdun, and it was donated to the Norwalk citizens for their efforts in World War I. So this was a cannon that was used in World War I. It was decommissioned, but because of the Norwalk citizens' efforts in the war, it was donated to us, and we've had it ever since. So this is right on the town green. Then at City Hall, we have all the names listed of the Norwalk citizens who served and died in World War II. And just even to make it a personal connection, my grandfather served in World War II, and I tried, and in the Korean War, and I say, all right, try to guess their names, and I just give them their initials. So just for fun, I said, all right, go find their names. But a lot of the times the kids are like, oh, my great grandfather or my uncle, or they find it fascinating the fact that, hey, they have their relatives' names on these memorials and they didn't even know it. And it brings in that extra connection to them. Last year we had the wall that heals. So this was an added bonus that we added, say, go attend the wall that heals. It was a traveling exhibit. I didn't change it because I didn't teach 7th grade this year. I taught 8th grade. And then we have them visit other memorials throughout the city. Some are in cemeteries, some are in local places, but we try to get them to incorporate as much local history as possible. Even going as far back as the founding of Norwalk with Governor Thomas Fitch and Yankee Doodle himself, because in Norwalk, the song Yankee Doodle was born because of Thomas Fitch V during the French and Indian War. So we have a direct connection to that. So the students can go and visit his grave, which actually has the song on his tombstone, which is pretty cool. So if you're ever in Norwalk and you're going to Sweet Ashley's Ice Cream, you can walk across the street and take a look at Yankee Doodle's grave. It's right there. And then even another part of Norwalk, which is called Rowayton, we have monuments there, and the students can go to that part. So I tried to incorporate all aspects of Norwalk into these assignments. So it's not just one part of the city, it's the whole city. And in 8th grade, similarly, can't speak this morning or today, we have a scavenger hunt on the founding and burning of Norwalk. So it goes all the way back to the early roots of Norwalk in the 1600s. They started Calf Pasture Beach and worked their way up because Norwalk was burned during the Revolutionary War. So they actually take the same path General Tryon took in 1779. And they go and stop at various markers along the way to show the history and how Norwalk was shaped around this concept. Now, all the things I just showed you are field studies. These are things out of the classroom. But what about in the classroom? So I have a long laundry list of things that I talk about just within the classroom. So what we do in 8th grade specifically, because it is local history, what I've designed is a parallel curriculum to the standard curriculum. So as we look at the United States evolving, I talk about how Norwalk evolved at the same time. So we'll talk about how Native Americans adapted to the different regions of the United States. Then I talked about how Native Americans adapted to Norwalk and the Eastern Woodlands. And we even went to the Pequot Museum so students could see it in person. So how the Eastern Woodlands adapted to it. And even recently, they discovered the Native American fort remnants as they're replacing the walk bridge in Norwalk, which I was lucky enough to go visit. And I showed the students pictures of the archaeological dig site and things that they found, and how it's changing history and how first contact in Connecticut is really changed. And it goes back all the way to 5,000 years ago, how Native Americans lived in Norwalk, to first interactions with the Dutch, thanks to Adrian Block and the early settlements in the 1620s. So that's the earliest artifacts they found. But again, as we evolve in the United States, I show how Norwalk evolved. Same thing, first settlements. Students I have a picture on the next slide. Students, I have a laminated map of the city of Norwalk, and I give students a newspaper article from the Norwalk Hour called The First Thanksgiving, which was actually written by Thomas O'Connor, whose park they visited last year. So there's a connection from 7th grade to 8th grade. And he wrote an article about the early settlements of Norwalk and where they were located. So I have the students find the locations on a map. So they're using map skills to understand where these places were. And some of the kids are like, well, that's right down the street from my house. So they make that connection also. In 7th grade, one of the other things that they do is they create an advertisement to get people to move to the city of Norwalk. It's part of their geospatial thinking unit when it comes to the tools of a geographer. And so we use, we're starting to dabble with GIS models. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not great with it, but we're starting to work with it and try to incorporate more 21st century skills within the lessons. Going back to 8th grade, as we evolve into the United States history, I talk about Yankee Doodle and the history in the French and Indian War and that connection. So I have some primary source readings, and we make the connection to how Norwalk played a role in the French and Indian War. Then we go into Norwalk's role in the Revolutionary War as we look at the causes of the Revolutionary War and its impact. So then we talk about, well, why did Norwalk burn? And I wrote a paper as an undergrad on the burning of Norwalk. So I took my name off the paper and I had the class do a read aloud, and I have pictures that go along with it. And I was like, all right, well, who wrote this? And the kids are like, I don't know, some historian. I said, yeah, me. And they're like, you did not write this paper. I'm like, yeah, I did. It was one of my college papers. They're like, well, that explains the grammatical errors. I'm like, thanks, I really appreciate it. But it gets a kick out of them. They enjoy it. But then they get a better understanding of how Tryon marched all the way up through Norwalk and why it was burned, which then leads to the foundation of the Firelands after the Revolutionary War and how Norwalk, Ohio got created. Because a lot of people don't realize that connection, that Washington, when he became president, gave people in Fairfield County the option of staying and rebuilding that were burned, or they can move out to Ohio. And so there's a segment in Ohio called the Firelands. And if you look, it's all Fairfield County names. And so that ties into Ohio history also, because a lot of those founding names moved out there. So again, that's just showing the progression of Norwalk's history. Even during the Revolutionary War, I'll mention the massacre of Fort Griswold and how Benedict Arnold led that charge and killed the 116 soldiers at Fort Griswold. Then when we get to the War of 1812, I talk about the Battle of Essex and how that impacted that part of the state. So it's not just Norwalk history. I'm trying to bring in as much Connecticut history as I can as well. In 7th grade, we go on a field trip to Lockwood Matthews Mansion, which is a gem here in Norwalk, but we also talk about the history of the mansion, so that the kids get a better understanding of how that played a role during the Civil War, because it was one of the few major building projects during the Civil War. You had the Capitol building, Washington Monument stalled, but during the Civil War, Matthews Mansion was probably one of the biggest construction projects going on during the Civil War. As 8th grade progresses, we go into the gold rush, California gold rush and westward expansion. So you have the founding of Norwalk, Ohio with the Oregon Trail, or Iowa. And then you have the California gold rush where you get Norwalk, California. So we steadily moved across the country, but that's how those 4 Norwalks came to be. So I showed that to my 8th graders as we continued through it. And something new that I'll be doing next year, or trying to get into the city of Norwalk, is I worked with the Sono Seaport Association to develop a history of Sheffield Island. And so they're looking to expand their history into the classrooms, because one of the other things that the city does is in 2nd grade now, no, 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, they do a history of Norwalk and they go visit Mill Hill and the Little Red Schoolhouse. So these are all some of the ways that I've tried to build and add and get students really fascinated with local history. I use the book Images of Norwalk by Lisa Wilson Grant, who's also a Norwalk Historical Commissioner. I got a class set of books from her on this, and Roten Point. So we talk about the old amusement park that used to be here. And I also use there's only one textbook really that was written on the history of Norwalk, and it was written in the 1990s. So it's getting a little dated, but I still use excerpts from that to use as a secondary source. This is the mapping project I was talking about. This year I gave the kids wampum. One of my colleagues, he's a scuba diver, so he brought in a bunch of clamshells. And so we were talking about wampum, so I gave the kids clamshells. This is a picture of the slideshow from 7th grade and how I have the 7th graders create an advertisement. So these are 8th graders, these are 7th grade assignments. The two pictures I have on my screen, this marker here is with my kids. It represents one of the highest points in Norwalk, but it has a sister marker. I believe it's in the country of Tanzania. It's a geo marker. So a doctor in Wilton had this built, but they also have a geo marker in Tanzania that it's a sister marker with it. And then this picture down here is at the Shea McGrath Memorial Service. This is right on Calf Pasture Beach in Norwalk.
Nice.
So that's all I had on how I incorporate local history and into my curriculum and at school. So I appreciate you taking the time to, stop and listen.
Thank
So
you.
hopefully if, once they share it, you can take a look at my assignments. If it's something you can adapt to your classroom, that's great.